Newsflash, stop the presses. Go hug someone close, because it's about to get real. Hi everybody, it's Dr. Earl with ACTIVZ, and today we're going to be talking about genes. Now the guys are thinking, genes, I've got a pair of jeans. Does he want my work jeans, or is he thinking about my nice jeans? And the girls are thinking, jeans? Yes. What color? Because I got to go pick out a top and some shoes. Not those kind of jeans, silly. We're going to be talking about the genes that make up our DNA. And more importantly, we're going to be talking about epigenetics. That's the science and the study of what turns on and off our genes. We can think of them like the control boxes that turn off and on our genes. Now, I will admit that some of this information is going to be very basic to many of you, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page when we talk about epigenetics, because it's very powerful. And I find that as I teach some of these very basic concepts, someone picks out something that is very powerful for them that they can share with others. And I want to keep this simple, direct, and that powerful. So with that in mind, here we go. So the first thing to realize is, again, and when we talk about epigenetics, is just like He-Man, you have the power. You have more power than you understand and that you realize right now. We're really entering a realm where epigenetics is changing the way we think about medicine, the way we think about life, longevity, illness, and the list goes on and on and on. So, with that in mind, let me take a few minutes and tell you how it works. So the classic model that we've all been taught is that genes are part of our DNA. And those genes, when they open up, they produce a certain protein. That protein is expressed and it does its job, and we're stuck with what we get. Well, what we're finding is there's some of that, but the reality is there's more of something called epigenetics. These genes have control boxes on them, and certain chemicals, molecules, situations, temperatures, energy levels, and on determine which of these genes are turned on and off. And we also are finding that there's this sequence of genes that is optimal, that's just amazing for longevity, for health, for energy, and you get the picture. Well, we obviously want to find that sequence of genes that really makes us function at an optimal level. So this image just really shows our chromosome being unraveled. So initially it's closed and wrapped by something called histones. Those histones are made up of something called methylation groups. Now this is all fancy science words, but just understand that it's these methylation groups that really determine whether a gene is turned on or turned off. So again, epigenetics. It's something that opens up and then actually reveals the gene, so the transcription factor that you can see here then attaches to the DNA, starts to download the information into the 3D printer. Yeah, that's the way to think of it. Into the 3D printer, produces a protein, and away we go. And depending upon how much of that protein we need, it may sequence quite a few of those proteins. Well, again, if we look at old genetics versus epigenetics, we find that old genetics talked about mutations and changes that happened inside of our DNA, and we thought that those changes were irreversible. So environment, toxins, different choices that we made that DNA change to an irreversible state. But good news, great news actually, we actually now understand that a lot of those changes that happen throughout our life influence the epigenetics and not the actual genes. And the epigenetics can be changed, reversed, and again, optimized. So what this means, if you look across the top, active exercise, good nutrition, really makes a difference in our DNA and gives us more energy, allows us to do the things that we love to do. Whereas if we drink too heavily, if we smoke, if we do drugs, make some poor choices, then again our DNA is expressed in such a way that we don't live optimally. Again, another depiction of where you have a Western diet, a lot of hamburgers, beer, soda pop, those type of things. We end up with fatty liver disease. We change our epigenetics, and we get a diseased fatty phenotype. Again, the phenotype is the expression. Whereas if we make good choices with foods, proper supplementation, exercise, we actually get a more healthy phenotype. Here's another interesting thing that we're just starting to learn, is the choices that you make actually can change the way that your genes are expressed in your children and in your grandchildren, because we can actually close down some of these DNA, some of these epigenetic sequences in such a way that it's passed generation to generation. So we have this collection of things that happen. Our genetics, our epigenetics, and our environment all come together to produce what's called our phenotype, or how we look, act, the energy we have, what we're able to do with our lives. To break it down even more simply, let me use these next couple of pictures. So here we have the depiction of a plant, and you can see that it's expressed on the backbone of a DNA to make it so it's even more understandable. This plant is getting eaten by the worm, but something triggers the DNA, something triggers the epigenetics within the DNA that's covering the DNA to access a gene that wasn't being expressed before. That gene, now activated, produces something that is toxic to the worm, and the worm goes away. So the plant is able to protect itself. Well, now because of the study of epigenetics, we know that again, not only can it produce the toxin and then repair, but then it can actually turn the toxin back off. Now, I use this analogy just to show the importance of epigenetics and how it works. These genes can be turned on and turned off based on the environment that they're under and that they are in. What we're trying to do is produce that sequence of DNA, proteins, and then a phenotype that lets us live our most abundant lives. This picture simply talks about the fact that, again, a lot of different factors play a role in our DNA and how it functions and what is expressed. So energy, radiation, the chemicals that are in our bodies, and that comes down to medicines, foods, toxins, what have you. Interestingly enough, sometimes the things that we put in from a stress level, so things we read and etc. Stress can be a huge factor in epigenetics. Emotional trauma can also play a huge role in epigenetics and what genes are expressed. And then again, the way we think, our thought process can also really change what genes are expressed and our health and healing overall. So with that in mind, I'm just going to briefly introduce this concept. I call it the windmill of health and wealth. And you can see I've changed the way that the wording is presented, but then also changed the way that wealth is spelled. And that's with a purpose, because the reality is each of these components play a very critical role in our epigenetics. That is true for each of these components. Every fin on that windmill plays a role. Spiritual, emotional, mental, intellectual, social, physical, and body changes. And again, this has to do with our nutrition, the chemicals, the toxins, the things that we put into our bodies. And we pay a lot of attention to that, but there's other components. And I got to tell you, this is one of the exciting things about ACTIVZ, is the fact that not only are we tackling the health from the standpoint of physical and these foundational molecules that make a big difference in our lives, but we're also able to provide opportunities so that people can get themselves into a better financial situation so that they can move forward in really amassing the rest of this health optimization that we want to see happen. Our environment plays a big role, and our occupation plays a role. Okay. So let's get back to some discussions, particularly about ACTIVZ. And we're going to talk about these foundational molecules, the ones that we really understand and know so well. Foundational molecules are critical because they play a role across a broad area within our bodies. we're finding that there are these molecules that don't just play one role. They don't just open up one gene. They don't just open up or affect one body system. They play a role across multiple different layers of our health. And I call them foundational molecules because of this. Because the reality is, if we affect the foundation, the core, the base, then we're going to affect the entire body. That's just the way it works. And you know, often when we talk with people who look at this from the outside, they say, oh, there's no way one molecule can do all that. And I ask them and I say, really? Tell me about water. Water is a molecule. It's 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. And yet it's a very powerful molecule that affects life across every aspect. Everything that it touches, it affects life. But this is the example of a foundational molecule. We know that there are molecules out there that affect multiple systems. And we know that there are molecules out there that can touch deep inside the DNA, activate these epigenetic control boxes, turn on genes that really can make a big difference in our lives. Well, how exciting to be a part of ACTIVZ. And it has to do with the fact that these are molecules. This is a program. This is a system. This is a company that is dedicated to make foundational changes. Foundational changes in health and find out foundational changes in individual wealth and finance. And I think that's very critical. So with that in mind, we can talk briefly about Link. Link, foundational molecule. Did you know Link, now they're finding that it has an even bigger role in resetting our immune system. It actually causes something called apoptosis of mast cells inside of our digestive system. These mast cells are what drive a lot of the autoimmune disease that's happening right now within our society. And so it does this through epigenetic modulation. So Link, butyric acid, absolutely amazing. Preferred food source of our digestive system. Really helps connect the brain-gut axis. I mean, it's just a foundational molecule. Pretty cool. Optimend, another foundational molecule. This molecule is absolutely pivotal in inflammation. It comes from curcumin, turmeric, tetrahydrocurcumin, and it's absolutely amazing. The key part about Optimend is the fact that it gets absorbed at such a high level. It can make a really big difference in people's health. It touches inflammation on all levels, on the tissue level, on the cellular level, and we know now all the way down to the genetic level. And it is a big influencer of epigenetics. So now we have the power 2, if you will, that really help us improve our health. Genomics is amazing. This is the NRF2 activator. NRF2 activator, boy, the science is just blowing the socks off genetic medicine. A NRF2 activator, they originally were pretty excited when they thought it activated 3 genes. It was an epigenetic modulator for 3 genes. And then they got more excited when they found out, oh, it modulates 400 genes. And they were jumping up and down and having parties and doing all these other things. You know, the scientist is Dr. Joe McCord, who was really the pioneer in a lot of this. And then, lo and behold, now they understand that it is a modulator of 3,000 genes. It gets better and better. Now, an epigenetic modulator doesn't mean that it just turns genes on. They're finding that genomics turns on the good genes and really accelerates that, and then downregulates the genes that can be harmful. Well, I got to tell you, ACTIVZ is going places. ACTIVZ is moving. And I invite you to jump on board, to be excited. The reality is, most of us here hearing this are on board and excited. Get excited. Get your friends and family excited, because the reality is this is foundational medicine. This is a foundational company. It's done right. And they have the trifecta of anti-inflammatory, epigenetics, gene modulation. Be excited. I'm excited. I hope you have a great time during the conference and that you learn a lot. And all my best to you.